Greetings all. The Green Garden Guy is beat to a pulp. I've been at it all morning long. Whooey. So my project is that right here behind me you'll see some great big 22-gallon tree tubs. I just picked them up from Hilo. Previously we had some crotons, the three-colored leaf plants in the spot. I had some brown Hawaiian tea, dwarf Hawaiian tea growing here. Well, you know, it looked good for years, and we enjoyed it and all, but that was before there were coqui frogs here, and so right over here is where I like to sit in the evening and relax on my front porch, watch the stars, and that was gathering the frogs. And I was forever trying to knock the frogs out of there so I could sit back and have a little peace instead of cookie. So, plus, sometimes it rains a lot around here, and I like having some of the vegetables that I'm growing right out the kitchen door over there in tubs back in the nursery. I got eggplants and basil and chilies and cucumbers and all sorts of things growing in tubs. And I thought, you know, well, the kitchen door's right over here coming the other way. I thought that'd be pretty neat if I got rid of all that darn big old frog-attracting vegetation that was over here. And I'd go ahead and I'd put in maybe 7 or 8 tubs for raising vegetables instead. That way I could just dash out here, grab a few pieces of food, and run back in and process them, whether it was raining or not. Now, lately, I've been listening to a lot of people, been telling me stories about how, oh my goodness, you know, oh, you got to have a greenhouse, blah, blah, blah. There's so much infrastructure in gardens, people around here. Well, I got to build a raised bed, you know, and all this stuff. Well, you know, I do. I use a lot of containers. I wouldn't be a nurseryman if I didn't use containerized plants, right? So I do a lot of container growing here, but I also do an awful lot of growing right in the earth. So I'm kind of a dirt gardener in that regard. And I'm not one who spends a lot of time modifying the earth to create these systems and infrastructures like raised beds and all that kind of stuff. Personally, I think it's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. That's my opinion of it. But, you know, to each their own. Now, if you got a back problem, certainly lifting your planters up so you can work with them is a fairly good idea. That's not a bad idea at all. But too often what I see is people either, you know, they are maligning the native earth that they have beneath their feet, and they think they can replace it with something that might be better by building these raised beds. There's all kinds of different reasons for all this infrastructure that people put in gardens. You know, truly, I don't like most of it. The reason why is that, hey, gardens get weedy, gardens get full of bugs, gardens get messy, and for me, if I can go out there and just mow the whole works, you know, or take a tiller to it, or take my weed flamer and burn it, or whatever it is, where the maintenance level is simple, as they say. If you're working too hard, you're probably doing it wrong. Now, I know while I was working in California, the Bay Area had quite a bit of silty loam and clay loam soils that, I don't know, for some reason people seem to have problems with them. They were actually outstanding agricultural soils. They were really good. But I'd hear these problems and people would keep wanting to replace them. Well, what most people don't know is when you start lifting up your planting and make a raised bed, that's cubic volume. Cubic volume is huge, and so the cost to refill your container is a lot of money. Okay, it costs you a lot to do that, and it's really most of the time just much more effective to go ahead and just mound the soil. You know, pile the stuff right on the earth, plant in it. Let's take a look at this first before I go any further. Well, of course, we have soil here. And so you'll see here's the fava beans, you know. Right over here is a row of string beans. There's cabbages and kale. And right over here is some outstanding looking corn. Just beautiful. Well, all this stuff is planted directly into the earth. Now there's, manure applied and fertilizers and whatnot, but pretty much everything here growing directly in the soil. Now I realize a lot of people that live here in Puna, they haven't got any soil. And in my case, those tubs sitting there, there is sort of soil underneath them, but to put this house in on deep soil, we had to doze the heck out of the site, and we filled here, and so mostly what's underneath the house and around the house is a lot of rock, and so it's almost as bad as some of you folks who have pure lava. I mean, you put the shovel in, it goes clink. All right, and we have found also that certain plants will grow pretty well in there. The hibiscus do pretty well and a few other things, but by and large, the soil is not very fertile either. Plus, there are nematodes. And so, by lifting my planting, using artificial soil mediums in these containers, I will be able to work with a little bit better quality of earth. My plants will definitely grow much better. We'll also be able to put a snail guard or a slug guard around them. You'll see one barrel there has copper around the outside of it. So we'll keep the slugs out of the food. We'll have a little better soil. We'll have less nematodes. I won't have to bend over as far. Let me show you cucumbers in tubs I did recently in the nursery that really do look very good. Right here is a batch of pickles growing in tubs. Got pig fencing there for supports, and I've got my fly traps dangling over there to keep the fruit flies out. Cucumber is pretty susceptible to the nematode, and so getting it up in a bucket really does help it grow well. It also gets a pickle worm, which is a big pain, and so having it right here, it's right under my nose. We're starting to get pickles in here. They're looking pretty good. And by having them right underneath my nose, keeps me from having a bad case of pickle worm, because I got my eyes on it. Attention, that's what it's all about. Are you watching your crop? Right here, you'll see I have put a strip of copper foil all the way around this barrel, so it touches itself again. Slugs and snails do not like to crawl over copper. It creates a minute electric current, and it tingles them so they back off and they won't go inside the tub. Now you can put 2 strips of this about a ½ an inch apart, and then use a soldering gun to connect a 9-volt battery, one pole to one strip, one pole to the other strip, and then you can make an electric slug death fence. So if they actually do connect the circuit on both strips, they're going to get 9 volts roaring through them, and they ain't going to like that at all. But even the minute electric current from our atmosphere here will keep them, so one strip does work. Although with a battery and 2 strips, that's 100%. Okay, this is closer to 85 or so. It's advisable that you put the tape around the container before you fill the container, because if you do it the other way around, it's not so easy. When you've got the container laying on its side, then you can just feed the tape and roll the container nicely. So you may ask yourself, why does the Green Garden guy use these plastic tubs instead of redwood or retaining wall concrete blocks or old rubber tires or a wide variety of other possible things you can use to build raised beds? Well, there's a good reason as far as I'm concerned. The main one really is cost. It's really cost. These containers, they don't give them away. They're $17 a piece. Wholesale is what they cost me here in Hilo at the nursery supply operations. I have used them before, and so far I've gotten over 5 years out of some of them. So if you break the $17 per container down, that's really pretty cheap. They will probably last as long as 10 years. They're made to sit in the sun in a nursery. They're nursery pots. Call them tree tubs. And so that means they're UV stable poly. That's not the same as if you get a plastic tub from Walmart, put it out, and it'll start crumbling in a year because it doesn't have the right kind of plastic. These are stable. They're cheap, they're lightweight, they're easy to drag around. If I get issues here, I can go ahead and just take them, turn them over, dump everything out, clean them up, put them back wherever I want them. If I don't like the project here, I can move it. You know, if you start putting in concrete blocks, or you start putting in redwood or treated lumber or some permanent structure, well, one, it can get full of weeds. It can get infested with creatures you didn't want. It can begin to take on termites. It may get ant colonies. But the main point is artificial soil mediums, or that is potting soils, they're not permanent. These are not stable materials. So give yourself about 3 years or so, and whatever you put in your raised beds, you're going to have to dig it out and throw it somewhere in the landscape. You're going to have to take it out of there, because what happens is the particle size keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And as that happens, you end up with sludge. Well, sludge gives you root rot, and so you lose all your air spaces. Now, I've used a process in the past where I took fir bark nuggets occasionally. I've also used coconut core, and I've dumped nuggets of that stuff in the bottoms of these containers about a third or so of the way up, then filled the rest with soil. Since the vegetables generally don't need extremely deep earth, there is no point in using the soil all the way to the base of the container, and so you can do that. It also seems to keep the sludge from forming. If you got big pieces in the bottom, slowly the little pieces do move downward, but your soil doesn't give out as quick. Plus, coconut core is very stable, very durable, just like a cocoa doormat. So in a few years' time, when these containers, when the soil begins to break down, I'm just going to take the soil, dump it into the landscape around my shrubs over here, you know, as a kind of funky compost. I'll recycle it somehow or another. And then I'm going to fill it up with new stuff. That way my growing medium will stay fresh. Also, nematodes will make their way inside these containers eventually. That does happen. And so they'll get infested. And when they do, dumping them out is the solution again. So I am a firm believer in, if you're using raised containers for gardening, which some of you will want to do this, especially if you're on rock, okay, I firmly believe that the containers should be mobile. They should be modular. They should be something that a human being can generally handle on their own. If you go into these big construction projects that build in raised beds, which I've done these for people, okay, and I know for a fact that I have to go back almost annually and refill those containers for them. Also, when you've got a great big rectangular volume, that's a lot of cubic volume. When you're using individual round containers here, then you're not using quite as much soil. And it allows you to walk between the containers and do work and such. So take your pick, folks. You know, I mean, I'm not going to tell you don't build raised beds, but raised beds get termites, they get problems, they get all kinds of issues, and they're hard to take apart, hard to change, hard to move. This isn't. This is real simple. So, my next project here is I got to get some soil inside the first tub so I can get planting. So, now, the tubs cost $17 each, all right? The sunshine mix, the soil that was put in here, was the high porosity form, so it means it had a lot of perlite, that's the white stuff, and it had mycorrhizae in it too, so that's the fungal inoculant that helps the plants grow better. It is not a bargain basement potting soil. What we're looking at here is a professional grade growing mix, the type of thing that the people you're buying your potted plants from might be using. The material costs me here on the island at the wholesale price $42 per bale. Okay, bales are 3 cubic feet. It takes 1.5 cubic feet to fill one of these containers. So basically half of 42 is 21 and 17, so we got $38 is what it costs to actually set up this tub and then fill the tub with a high grade of soil. Now you can buy cheaper soil mediums, but you get what you pay for. And really, my opinion on growing is that you can't grow a good plant in a cheap soil. And so if you're buying the best soils that you can afford, you're probably going to get the best results. Now, some of the major manufacturers that are out there actually produce some really low grade and very poor potting soils. I don't want to get sued, so I'm not going to say a word about that. I may have mentioned it at times in the past. But just be sure that what you're using is the best material you can find. Now, being this is a professional grower's medium, there is no nutrient in it. And so I'm going to have to fertilize to get this going. Now, I do have another bale, so I have enough to finish all 4 of my tubs. But I ran out of copper tape. And it's a lot easier to put that tape on when the barrels are empty. So I'm going to hold off filling the rest of these till I get some more copper tape. So what I intend to do out here at this point in time, since it's January, a really good crop in these barrels is going to be lettuce. Most popular lettuce here in Hawaii is the Manoa, which is a type of butterhead. That's a real good one too. But I find that I have some trouble with Manoa unless I do it under cover, because occasionally here in Mountain View we will get rain so hard that it will bruise the poor stuff because it's tender, and so it'll shoot it full of holes. Last winter I actually had a hail fall here, and we ended up with bullet holes from the hail all through my Manoa. This is Panacea. Panacea is a salad bowl type, which I'm sure most long-time gardeners are familiar with salad bowl. It's a classic Americana. This one is a French name. I don't know whether Johnny's found it in France or where they found it, so I can't tell you the origin, but I can tell you that it was one of Johnny's introductions at Johnny Selected Seeds. They have some marvelous lettuce. And this one grows really good here for me. It's a compact form of salad bowl. Salad bowl gets kind of big and open and rangy sometimes. This one stays nice and tight. It's beautiful. Now, as I said, there's no nutrients in this medium, so we're going to have to feed it. Now, I ran out of organic fertilizer the other day when I was feeding my garlic, so I'm going to have to use Nutricoat to do this. But anyway, I figure at least 8 heads to a container here. Like I said, it's a compact salad bowl. Plus, I'll start thinning early. I mean, there's really probably only room for 4 to 6 mature heads inside this bucket. So now you can figure out what it's going to cost you to raise your lettuce in a raised container. Now, here in Hawaii, I would say the main reason you want to use this container to do the lettuce is because you can put the slug barrier on. Everybody who lives here knows all about rat lungworm, and I guess South Florida's got the same stuff too. And so this is a solution. You can grow clean lettuce right out there in your yard, provided you put a slug barrier down. So I figure about 8. We'll see. Now, this medium is compressed when you buy it. It's in bales that are squeezed, and so it's packed together, and I have to go ahead through here as I was unloading the soil, and I have to break up the chunks, okay? And then we go through with water, and we just flood it, because that will make it swell up real nice. So, a couple of teaspoons of this stuff down around the bottom of the plants will get them going. Once this gets going, I'll probably find some fish emulsion here, and we'll feed this with an organic fertilizer. This will get them off to a start. Okay. Now close up the holes. You will notice that I was putting my fertilizer near the surface. There's a good reason for that, at least around here in Hawaii. We get a lot of rain most of the time, and the rain will take the fertilizer and wash it down into the soil. Well, if you put all the fertilizer underneath or on the sides, which is typical in drier climates, you'll end up with all your fertilizer gone below your plant before your plant has a chance to even use it. True. I learned that the hard way. So, if you live in a rainy climate like we have here, put the fertilizer high, not low. Alright, well, there's one tub. You're going to want to level your containers, because if you don't, then what will happen to you is the water will run downhill. And so you want to try to get the containers so they're relatively flat, so when you run water in here, so that the water sheets and carries the soil evenly in all directions rather than to one side of the pot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, there we go. We got 2 out of the 4 containers finished. Got the lettuce planted in here. Well, tell you what, peoples, I'm beat. So let's recap. Like I said, I hear a lot of people talking about how much infrastructure you need to actually do a garden, and otherwise, this whole idea that you got to build these raised beds and you got to replace the native soil and blah, blah, blah. Like I said, I'm a dirt gardener, man. I work in the earth. That's all there is to it, as much as possible. But I'm also a container guy. So I kind of cross over between the two, but when I'm in the soil, when I'm growing my food, most of the time I do not believe in spending tremendous amounts of money on building these raised beds and hauling in materials. For one, it means you've got to haul a lot of stuff in. Chances are you're not going to want to afford to buy professional growing medium like that Sunshine or that's out there. You're going to get some stuff from a soils yard somewhere, and it's always questionable as whether that stuff's good or not good or what it was made out of and so on. So it doesn't necessarily help. Now, as you see, I have done containers. Now, I have my reasons, and so if you live here in Hawaii, you have rat lungworm, and you may want to get some of them leafy vegetables up off the soil. Right here behind me, we have eggplants. I also have basil over here behind me. And basil declines quickly when the soil gets too wet and when there's nematodes. So does eggplant. And so I get much longer yields out of the plants in my garden if I put them up in these containers. Also, I've got copper around these containers back here, and I'm not worried about the slugs much on the eggplants. I can scrub them or peel them, so it's not an issue. But the basil, well, I can wash it, but that's a pain, and so I like to have nice clean basil with no slugs. Lettuce, another thing, cleaning nice, soft, delicious lettuce is pretty hard to do, other than to rinse the soil off of it. So you want to try to make sure the slugs didn't get in. So it's a great reason. Keeps the nematodes out, keeps the slugs out. If you have lava or hard rock here, there's no better way to go than some nice big containers. But when you do this stuff, I highly recommend, instead of spending a fortune building all this infrastructure out there and thinking it's going to make your garden any better, I really suggest that you just go with more modular ideas. Containers. Tree tubs are super. They hold up in the sun. They don't get termites. They won't rot away on you. Tape sticks to them beautiful so you can keep the slugs out. There's a lot of great reasons why you might use, professional growers poly tubs. They come in all grades. You know, yeah, for what it's worth, folks. But I think, being that we are such a technological society today, the things that we used to get away with all of a sudden seem like they're too old-fashioned or something. I don't know. Everybody wants to have technological growing solutions, Anyway, aloha, folks. Hang loose. Happy gardening.